Due to a city council meeting, the meeting of the Watuppa Water Board will now come to order at 6:48 p.m. Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll for attendance?
Yep.
I think at this time we must make a statement that Mr. Pearson has left the Water Board, and the Water Board being a three-member board, 2 members constitute a quorum. Therefore, the board is in order to come into session.
Excellent. President Terrio?
Present.
Member Ferrer? Here.
There being a quorum, I call this meeting to order. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made whether perceived or unperceived by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. With that, I would ask the clerk to move to item number 1, citizen input.
Yeah, item number 1, citizens input. If there is anybody here for citizens
No
input.
citizens input.
Thank you.
Item number 2, minutes of the previous meetings. We have 2 sets of meetings minutes to be approved, those of August 11th and October 14th.
Can we approve them separately, or should we? I'd like to approve them separately if we could.
Say again,
Could
please.
we approve them separately?
Yes.
As a separate item?
Yes, I'd like a motion to approve the minutes for the August 11th, 2021 meeting.
Make a motion.
Motion made, motion seconded. Mr. Clerk, do we need a roll call vote on that?
Since we're back in person, there is no roll call vote.
No roll call
So you
provision,
can just
therefore,
call for a vote.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Therefore, the August 11 minutes are accepted as submitted. October 14th, 2021 minutes. Maybe we have a motion on that.
Make a motion.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion, all in favor, accepted. The October 14th, 2021 meeting minutes are approved. Item number 3, proposed leak abatements and denials. I would just like to ask 3 quick questions, and those are 127 Oxford, 48 Ridge, and 0 Duval. They seem awfully high.
Yeah, so just one, so there was 2 corrections from when the agenda was posted to finalize what's in front of the board. So that would be on Oxford Street rather than $1,268.74. The recommendation for abatement is $1,048.63. The other correction that was made was on Frost Street. The original agenda recommended $168.82. The revised that's provided in the packet tonight was $171.14. So again, just on those the ones that you mentioned about Oxford Street, we can take them individually if you'd like explanations. So Oxford Street's the original bill was $2,684.82. Again, that's indicative of a leak within a property that goes unintended or unaddressed for a full 3-month period. Their average bill prior to that was somewhere in the $600 range, $500-600 range, somewhere in that ballpark. So the abatement for these, as you know how the abatement policy works, we take the average of the bills, we subtract that out of the high bill, and then we abate 50% of the average. So their original bill, you could also see on the analysis, the quarter after is when, so what they got that large bill, and the leak must have continued into a portion of the quarter after, and the quarter after was a $1,300 bill, almost $1,400 as well. But we're only able to abate one bill.
They've, if I may, what type of a property is this? Do we know? He seems to have jumped significantly a couple of times. Just
Yeah, if you notice in the beginning, there was a new meter put in, it looks like a leak potentially back in 19. It was reduced, and then this leak, and then it was reduced again. I'm not sure, it doesn't have the land use code on here for the type of property, so I'm not sure if it's a single or multi.
Multifamily.
It is a multifamily, okay.
multifamily? Wow. Thank you.
So that was, again, if you wanna talk about the other one, you mentioned 48 Ridge.
Yeah.
Forty-eight.
48 Ridge, yeah, he seems to be going along the 400, 500, 600, and then he jumps to 14. And then I see one here on 5/10/21 at 3,400.
Yeah. Yep, so it did go up to, the high bill was a $3,400 bill, with an estimate, so there was probably a leak, an estimate, and then, the leak continued. So, again, you can see the average is running probably, you know, in the $500 range, and, as the abatement policy, subtract the average, and we provide 50% credit of the overage, which gives a credit of $1,485.62.
He seems to jump around quite a bit. I looked from 5/10/21 to 8/9/21. He drops from 37,006 down to 7,100. Wow.
Yeah. You know, again, for years, that's been talked about, these high bills that people get, you know, prior, people used to call them heart attack bills, because, you know, people really, you know, when they get the bill.
Yeah.
But, you know, these are, it's typically a leaky toilet, a faucet, that's
Water
left,
tank.
that's left on, hot water tank that burst, or leaking in a basement that goes into the dirt or something of that sort. You know, a lot of times what these leaks are.
Not to belabor the point, I'd just like ask a question. I had a situation, actually it happened several different times, in which the property in question was also one well known to the police department for drug trafficking. And what they found was that the drugs were being stashed in the toilet tanks, and that the toilets were running constantly. I'm not kidding. That was what was causing the high, yeah. And the overflow tubes were just running and running and running. And it was discovered that way. So sometimes it's interesting to look and see if there's any criminal activity going on in some of these properties, because I can even tell you the name of the young lady who is infamous in the water department. All right, thank you very much. Chair would entertain a motion to accept the leak abatements as presented.
Motion to approve the leak abatements as listed.
Seconded. All in favor of
Yes. Aye.
all? Aye.
Excellent.
Moving on. Item number 4, open meeting law complaint. This is from Mr. Colin Dias.
If you'd like, I can read the open meeting law complaint just for the record. On 10/14/21, the Watuppa Water Board held a virtual meeting. The board violated the open meeting law by, the board failed to provide instruction for the public in its agenda notice on how to attend the virtual meeting until the board revised its agenda less than 24 hours before the 10/14 meeting began. During the board's 10/14 meeting, the board has, under item 3 of its agenda, rules and regulations, gate access at reservation. This item did not clearly list what was to be discussed at the meeting pursuant to the open meeting law section 20B. The item number 3, the board discussed and made votes regarding hunting dogs, hunting permits, and target shooting during item number 3 in its agenda, and it clearly had nothing to do with the agenda items, and these were reasonably anticipated topics, as the board members already had the rules and regulations at their disposal before the meeting began. Number 4, a quorum of the board briefly discussed inspection towers, gatehouses, screen houses under item number 4, which is labeled other potential matters. This item number did not clearly state what would be discussed, a violation of open meeting law section 20B. The board, while meeting virtually, failed to take a roll call vote to approve its meeting minutes. When the vote to approve the minutes, Mr. Pearson and Mr. Terry voted here, which is not an appropriate way to vote in a roll call. So actions requested, a new vote of the 8/11 minutes in further compliance with the open meeting law. I did provide you a draft of a response to these items within your packet. If anyone has any questions or would like to discuss the response or anything, feel free.
I don't know if you have any comments. I found the draft letter to be complete.
I agree.
It's fully explanatory. I'm sure Mr. Dias understands. And I shall not state here again.
Okay, excellent. If the board would like to vote to acknowledge me to respond to the open meeting law claim via the draft that was provided.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve the draft and have it forwarded to Mr. Dias as our response to his complaint. And,
Motion made.
So seconded, and all in favor, aye. Therefore, we will send that on to him. Okay, moving right along. Algae Control and Watershed Management Agreement between the City of Fall River, the Town of Westport, and Chiberton, the Town of Chiberton, Rhode Island. We received a copy of the agreement as stated. This requires a signature of the board this evening to finalize this agreement. I think it's a step in the right direction. I guess the situation is that it's going to be approximately $100,000. The money has been put up by Bay Bank, I believe. This is something that is vital to the area. We just had a rowing event on that pond that brought thousands of people down to utilize that asset. And I believe that that's just the beginning of what could be something really terrific. It's hard to believe that we've got an Olympic class rowing course in the South Watuppa Pond. So I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the agreement.
Yeah, just so I can explain the agreement, just so everybody is aware, the agreement is for us to enter in with Westport and Chiberton. There is no monetary value to this agreement. It's an agreement that we're all going to get to the table and try to look for a solution. If there is monetary value that needs to be added in the future, that'll be up to the parties to come up to a decision at that point. But this means that we're all going to work together. There is the phase 1, which is currently underway, and as the president did say, it was funded by Bay Coast Bank in the amount of $100,000. So that is within here. That's a project that's already underway. We're expecting to get a draft report from that sometime before the holidays here, review that over the holidays, and then have another public meeting after the holidays. Next week, I'll probably be sending out an email notice to all the public that was at the first meeting, just to let them know what's going on. This is gonna be a multi-year, multi-step process moving forward. But this brings everybody within that watershed, Fall River, Westport, Tiverton, to the table so that we can all work together to better that watershed.
Great. What would the clerk like? A motion to approve?
Yes.
So, Chair would call for a motion to approve the agreement for algae control and watershed management between the city of Fall River, the town of Westport, and the town of Chiberton, Rhode Island.
Motion made.
Motion made, motion seconded, all in favor? Motion passes. Next item. Next item on the agenda is lead.
My pointer froze. So the next item that's on your agenda is a possibility of lead in your drinking water PowerPoint presentation. So earlier today, I was on WSAR explaining about an exceedance that we recently had within our drinking water system. It's an action level exceedance. So it's an exceedance that requires us to take action. The action that we need to take is work with EPA and DEP to get public notification out about what's happening. So this is in regards to lead in your drinking water. Our drinking water, as it leaves our plant, does not have any lead in it. We test sample throughout our entire system. We have no detects throughout our system. Where lead gets developed from is within the lead service that comes from a house, that comes from the main into a house, or within pipes that are in the system. So we'll start off here, a little bit of introduction. So the drinking water that leaves our plant, again, is lead free. When it leaves the facility, it moves through the distribution system. Most of our distribution system is made up of either ductile iron pipes, cast iron pipes. It says that, EPA says that plastic too. Some systems use plastic. We don't have plastic. We have a very small amount of asbestos concrete pipe, but it's a stable asbestos concrete pipe that feeds some very limited sections of our system. So if we only have steel within our pipes, and we have no lead within our water, how are we having this issue? So the issue is caused, again, when you have either a lead service that feeds a property, or lead solder within copper pipes, or brass fixtures or brass piping within a house. Lead, you can't see or smell within the water, so you can't see, oh, this water has lead, this water doesn't. You can't smell an odor. There's no particular taste to it. The lead would get into the water from sitting within one of these either lead services or other facilities, that would have lead and allow it to leach into the water for a long period of time. If it's water that's moving through the pipes and it's constantly moving around, it's not going to have time for the lead to be able to leach into it. So even with areas where high levels of lead are found within your drinking water, that typically only contributes to about 20% of the lead within that somebody could ingest. So lots of other spots where you can get lead from, whether it be lead paint within a house, lead paint within the environment, dust is very high in lead, environmental dust, as well as soils typically. You think about it, years ago, there used to be lead in the gasoline. Lead used to come out of the exhaust of the cars, would eventually fall into the soil. That's how a lot of times within soil remediation, you end up getting backgrounds of lead within soils, within urban soils. So, Environmental Protection Agency passed drinking water regulations for copper and lead back in 1974. Lead services is, one of the things that Fall River is in our system. They were installed typically between 1920 and 1950. It's kind of funny, you talk to people within the water field and they say, poorer communities back in that time didn't get lead services because they couldn't afford it, the wealthier communities, which back in the 20s to 50s, Fall River was booming with the textile industry. We were a more prosperous community. Our community was able to afford lead services, which at the time was a better product to have than the other options. So what was better back then isn't that good now. So 1974, Congress passed the Safe Drinking Water Act. That put certain levels of different types of contaminants within the drinking water supply. Then EPA established treatment techniques and enforceable procedures for different levels of different things within the water. The treatment technique regulated for lead, referred to as the lead and copper rule, which is something that EPA developed after the Clean Drinking Water Act, requires that water systems to control the corrosivity of the water. The regulation also requires a system to collect tap samples from sites served by systems. So under the lead and copper rule, you're always going to be doing sampling, because most systems all have lead, whether it be in internal plumbing or, most systems have lead, whether it be in the service, internal plumbing, in their fixtures. They also pretty much all have copper. So most houses have copper plumbing within their houses. So you're going to be sampling for one of the two. Lead sampling and lead testing in the city of Fall River isn't anything that's new. It's been done for years and years and years. Back in '95 or so, back in the '90s, is when DEP and EPA got real heavy into some of the testing. As you came into '99, the city was put under an ACO, an administrative consent order, because we were above the action levels and didn't follow some of the steps that needed to be taken during that time. We worked with DEP and EPA back then, up to 2005. We adjusted our water chemistry with their approval to be able to minimize any corrosivity within our system, and we were able to move forward with a new ACO since 2005 that we've been under, and we've been compliant with, and we still are. EPA requires that we do a consumer confidence report every year, and also whenever there's a problem, we need to alert customers. So since we hit this action level, so the action level for lead within a drinking water system is 0.015 parts per million. What our sample was 0.016 parts per million. We were 1/1000th of a part per million above the action level. I'm going to talk a little bit about the sampling that we do. The last round of sampling, we were on a 3-year cycle for our lead and copper. So we were good for a while. You're typically on biannually sampling, then you go to yearly sampling, then you go to a 3-year sampling. We were on a 3-year sampling cycle. 2018 third quarter was the last time that we tested, and we were right underneath the action limit. This year, when we tested on the third quarter, we were just above the action limit, as I said. We sent out the sample kits to 70 different homes. So how we actually do the sampling, this is the actual kit that we use and a lot of other communities use. We make these up. We get a bottle from our testing laboratory. So this is a typical sample bottle. We fill it out with the client's name and everything on the front of the sample bottle. The sites that we choose have to be what are called Tier 1 sites. So they have to be confirmed that they have a lead service that goes from the main all the way into the house. So those are the sites that we're required to test. We can't go and test something that has a plastic service or a copper service. It has to be something that's a lead service. So the sample kit has that bottle, has a paper. We knock on the door. If nobody answers, it says, "Sorry, we missed you. We'd like to pick this up tomorrow." We put the date on it and stuff like that. In there's a change of custody form which the customer needs to fill out. There's directions on how to do the actual sample. So this sample isn't taken by our staff. It's not taken by somebody that fully knows the sampling process. But we try to give as much information to the customers as possible to be able to allow them to properly do this sample. And then if we don't get them the first time, we go back multiple other times. So we like to have 60 samples. Requirement is 30 through DEP. We like to have 60 samples to make sure we have a good sample set. So we first delivered to this first 60 homes. We usually have 10 reserve. We weren't getting a good response from the customers in providing us back the samples. So we went to our reserved and passed out those other 10 sample kits. And we ended up getting 64 sample kits back. So how the sample works, the customer gets this bottle, they need to go to either a kitchen sink or a bathroom sink and fill this bottle. But it needs to be what's classified as a first draw sample. So the customer needs to take this bottle and make sure that the water hasn't moved in the system for at least 6 hours. So either overnight, where nobody's used the restroom during the night, or you get it where everybody goes to work, right when it's the first person to come home from work, takes the cap off, goes over to their kitchen sink, fills it up, puts the cap back on. That's how the sample is taken. You don't let the water run, you don't let anything happen. So it's the water that you get in that's been sitting inside your faucet, the pipe's underneath the sink, and then it's some section of pipe that feeds down after the meter. So currently, every year we bid out for our testing laboratories. Currently this year, Rhode Island Analytical is the lab that we're using. They're sent out to those labs. We don't test for lead in-house. Again, this is just a picture of the sample kit that we send out. It needs to sit for a minimum of 6 hours. Usually the kitchen or the bathroom, cold water faucet. It needs to be a cold water faucet. You can't use hot water because it changes the chemistry and it won't come up with the proper test. So these are all things that the homeowner needs to do when they're taking this test. So this is the actual claim form. So this is a chain of custody. So this is what tells us, the homeowner here is certifying that they did the test properly per the instructions. The sample location they're telling us the sample location, what time was it taken, when was the water last used before it was taken, and this chain of custody follows from this sample all the way through the process so that we have all this information. And it's certifying that they haven't had any plumbing or any remodeling or rework of the plumbing within their house, and if they do, they have to describe the changes because that could stir something up, which could give us a bad sample too. So sample results from this year. So we have an action level exceedance. So the action level for Massachusetts is 0.015 parts per million. And that's looked at what's called the 90th percentile. So you don't take an average of all of them. You don't take the highest number or the lowest number. You take what's called the 90th percentile. So you set all of them up on a chart, 90% down for the number of samples that you have. That's the number that you use. So there was a number with the samples that we got. There was a number, probably about a third of them were no detects, so they came back with 0. There was a number of them that were extremely low, 0.0084, 0.0012, as you went through the list. 8 of the samples were above the action level. So 8 of those samples were elevated. So once we got that back, we need to notify all of our customers. There's a procedure that needs to be gone through. We need to notify our customers, get public notification out there within 60 days of the closing of that quarter. So the quarter was closed a while ago, took us some time to get the results in. We need to get all of our notifications out prior to November 30th. Again, so this isn't a violation. So we're not going to get an NON unless we don't follow the public notification procedures and other procedures that are going to be required. We're not getting a write-up. It's not a violation of our administrative consent order that we have, just because we're going through all this process. So it's not a violation or anything like that. It requires public notification and different types of outreach. So again, we talked a little bit in the beginning about lead and how lead gets into the water. So you have your water main that runs out here in the street, running down the street. You have a pipe that feeds from the water main into your house, and then you have all the piping within your house that feeds to your different fixtures. A couple of ways that it can happen. This lead service line that feeds from the street into the house is one way that could happen. If that's lead, there's many materials that could be made out of. Brass, we've seen brass, steel, highly unlikely in Fall River. Again, those were a lot of times back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, those were put in other communities that weren't affluent as Fall River back at that time. But you also have now copper's been used for years within these services, and most recently, over the past probably 20 years, they've been using a lot of HDPE polyethylene that is used for this. There's also cross poly that they use and some other different types of poly materials. Once you get into the internal plumbing of your house, a lot of houses is copper pipes within the house. You either have copper, you have iron in some houses, you have brass in some houses. More uncommon, most common is copper, but you do find those other ones. And so brass piping or steel piping could leach lead into the water as well. Those are used, those are manufactured with lead within there. Copper piping, not so much, but you have the solder that's within the copper piping. I think lead solder was used up until the 80s. The mid 80s, it was used still for connection of copper piping. I think even today there's still some piping. I think waste piping you can still use copper solder on and stuff like that. So, lead solder on copper pipes. So, it's still out there, but that is one way that it could get in there. The other way is the fixtures. So you get into some of these fixtures that have, the beautiful Fall River, you have a nice, beautiful old sink with the elegant brass faucet that comes out. Brass, huge amount of lead was always used in manufacturing brass. That's how it was so malleable. That's how it was able to bend and it wouldn't crack during the cooling process. And the forging process is they would add lead into it. And that lead from the brass can leach into the water. So there's multiple different ways that it could get in, primarily within the system that's owned by the private homeowner. So all the plumbing within the house falls underneath the jurisdiction of the state plumbing code, underneath the plumbing inspector's office. The water service that runs from the main into the house, as per city ordinance, the responsibility of that service is the property owners, all the way from the main, all the way into the house. The service, repair, maintenance of that per city ordinance is the property owner's responsibility. So that's kind of where that is. Historically, with the services, and one of the next pictures we'll talk a little bit more about the service itself. So again, how lead gets into the drinking water. We talked about plumbing materials and the fixtures and how it can corrode. So the alkalinity, so the chemistry of the water. You have alkalinity and you have the pH, which tells you the acidity of the water. We did studies back in the early 2000s, and we adjusted our pH. We adjust our pH with caustic so that we keep it around 8.5 is our target. We're typically right around that area, between 8.2 and 9.6. But if our pH starts getting too high, then we have issues with contact time. So we need to keep our pH within a certain range to be able to properly have contact time to kill the bacteria in the water with the chlorine, and then also be able to make it so our water isn't too corrosive. What stops it once we send it out into the system from that pH moving up or down or adjusting within the system is what you call alkalinity. Alkalinity is a buffer that stops the pH from moving, really. Our alkalinity, we send our alkalinity out about maybe 28 or so. Our target, our minimum that we want to see it at is 20. We always stay above that. Typically throughout the systems, we get 24s whenever we test alkalinity throughout our system. So our target for alkalinity is high, and we have to use CO2 to adjust our water to be able to get the alkalinity we would want it So that's not something we get naturally, that's something that we have to adjust. So temperature of the water is one thing that can really affect whether lead leaches in or not. So if the water is warmer, it's more likely that you're gonna have lead leach in. So again, so that's why when I talked about our samples need to be taken with the cold water, because if you use hot water, it changes the chemistry of the water and how the lead could leach into the water. The amount of wear on the pipe, so if you have a pipe, so when you get the pH properly balanced within the water system, you end up building a coating on the interior of a lead service. So these are some sections of lead services that I have here. This is a 1-inch lead service, 5/8 lead service. These were removed. And inside here, you end up getting a coating, a little buildup that protects the water from getting fully in contact with the lead. As long as that stays intact, that interior coating, by keeping proper pH and proper alkalinity, it's highly unlikely that the lead is going to leach into the water. So that's one thing that needs to be maintained, is that protective coating on the interior of the lead. So that's where the amount of wear on the pipe. So something that's used constantly high flows could potentially strip that off, and you know, that would allow the water to come more in contact with the lead than somewhere that has a lower flow that potentially has you know, less contact with the lead. How long the water stays in the pipe or stays in the faucet or stuff like that. So you have a faucet, you know, that you use once a year or twice a year in your basement, you know, during the holidays or something like that. Water inside that faucet probably has a lot more than the one upstairs in your kitchen that you use every day. Presence of protective scale or coatings inside the plumbing material, that's something that I just talked about. So again, and there's multiple things that could affect that. You know, if you have a service that comes down to a restriction, so that restriction, that small point, the velocities right there, the water are going to become a lot higher. They're going to scour, so that could be a potential point where more lead could enter the water than other areas. So this is what I talked about when I talked about we're going to get back to the lead services and how they enter your house. So out here you have the public main in the middle of the street or near the middle of the street. Typically ours on the middle, they're usually 4 feet off the curb, but just for underneath the paved roadway. So the property owner owns the service all the way from this main, all the way into the house per ordinance. So a lead service or any type of service would run this. This will either be typically a 1-inch service. The smaller lead services were 5/8, so sometimes 3/4 copper is a typical size. We run all 1-inch plastic now. Primarily, the water department, as a courtesy for its customers, has always maintained this section from the pipe to the curb stop. So right in here, you have what's called the curb stop. That's that little box that you see in front of the house, that if we need to shut the water off to the service or to the house, we're able to access that in or near the sidewalk and turn the water off to their property. What that does, that gives us a one point to tell whether there's a leak. If there's a leak out here, we can turn this off. If the water stops, then we know it's on this side, and the property owner is responsible for replacement. If it's on this side, then typically, again, as a courtesy to our customers, we take care of the repair. But that's the one point where we can shut it off to be able to tell potentially whose side it's on. But then you also have this other section that is owned by the customer that runs all the way into the house. So when we do water main replacement projects, which we've been doing since the early 2000s, and one of the things that we always talk about is the lead service replacement that we're doing. The lead service replacement that we're doing, and what was required by DEP within our administrative consent order, and what has always been acknowledged as removal of a lead service, is the removal of the service from the main to this curb stop. What we'll talk about in a little bit is the credit program that we have for when the customer wants to do their side of the service, the home side of the service, the credit program that we have set up. But when we've removed a lead service, we've always gone from the main to near the property line. So, this is underground here. You can see, so this is an old lead pipe, a grayish pipe. This probably had some type of leak on the service. This isn't a picture of one of ours, this is something. If we go out to a lead service or a house where there is a leak, if we go dig down and have a lead service there, we replace from the main all the way to the curb stop. We don't put in a small piece of copper, we remove that full lead service. But just to show you what a lead service would look like compared to a copper service. So health effects of lead exposure. Again, you know, first thing to do if people are concerned about this, the first thing kind of to do will be to determine whether you have a lead service. In the next couple of slides, we'll walk through how for somebody to be able to tell that. But let's talk a little bit about the health risks. You know, the most health risks would be to infants, pregnant women, or younger children, as has been discussed in the past. Again, you got to think the sample that we did, a third of them would non-detect, a third of them were below the limit, and there was only 8 out of the 64 that were above the limit. But in adults, there is some health effects: decreased kidney function, brain damage, digestive nervous system disorders, reproductive problems, cardiovascular effects. Anybody that has any concerns, we always recommend that they talk to their primary care physician or their own personal doctor to be able to discuss any of these effects. So in pregnant women, reduced growth of the fetus, premature birth. In children, behavioral learning problems, lower IQ, slower growth, hearing problems, diseased kidney function. So these are people that have large long-term exposure to this. Again, any health concerns or anything like that, I'm not a trained health professional. None of my staff in the water or sewer department are trained health professionals. We always recommend that somebody contact a properly trained health professional to discuss any of the health effects related to this. Steps you can take to reduce your exposure. So, you know, we talked about the health effects, but it's not good, you know, if you have a lead service, the water's still drinkable, it's still usable, it's still bathable, you can still brush your teeth. You just want to make sure that you have fresh water coming out of that tap. So our recommendation, EPA's recommendation, and we've had this on our bills. Again, this isn't a new problem in Fall River. This problem's been around since the lead services were installed in the 20s. This problem was brought to light back in the late 90s, early 2000s. You know, there was other people standing here doing the same thing. Probably not with as nice of a PowerPoint presentation, but they got through it back then, and we're letting the public know that the problem is still here, and what to do to protect themselves is the biggest thing. So our recommendation is to run the tap water for 15 to 30 seconds. So when you wake up first thing in the morning, you go to brush your teeth, turn that tap on, let it run for 15 to 30 seconds. That will take and bring fresh water from the main all the way into your house, so you won't have that water that's been sitting in the service or sitting within your faucet or sitting in your pipes, you know, all night while you were sleeping for the past 8 hours. It'll give you nice fresh water. So run it for 15 to 30 seconds, or turn it on, stick your hand under it. You'll notice the temperature change when it hits your hand when you're getting some fresh water that came out of the main compared to what was sitting in your house all day. So use cold water when you're cooking, preparing baby formula, stuff that you might want to do. You always want to use cold water because, again, we talked earlier about how the temperature, when the water temperature increases, it changes and helps that lead leach into the water more. So do not cook with or drink from the hot tap water. Lead dissolves more easily within the hot water. Don't boil your water. So you know, you think of a contaminant in the water. You always hear about boil water orders or something like that. Boiling the water does not remove the lead. The lead is a dissolved mineral, dissolved metal within the within the water. Boiling the water will not remove the lead. All it'll do is remove some of the water and potentially, intensify the lead. Identify and replace any plumbing fixtures that contain lead. So maybe that old faucet that's leaking that, is all brass, maybe it's time to replace that. And, all brass, all the way up until 2014 is when they passed the lead-free, zero lead within brass fixtures.
Really?
Yeah, all the way up until
Wow.
2014, and they didn't have to phase out all their stock until I believe it was 2016 or 2017. So all brass fixtures up until that point still had a fair amount of lead within their actual things. So you're talking brass fixtures, brass couplings within piping systems, everything.
Brass meters.
Yep, brass still had a fair amount of lead within them. It wasn't until, like I said, 2014 was when it was passed for lead-free within brass. Even to this day, though, I think it's 0.07% of the product by weight they can still have of lead within the brass. So this is what we were talking about before, the actual, how to tell whether you have a lead service or not. This is a couple of different examples, and we'll have another slide. So this is down potentially in your basement or a crawl space of your house where your water meter is. So this is where the water service comes into your house, goes into your water meter, and then feeds out to the whole plumbing system within your house. So to find out whether you have a lead service, first you figure out where your water meter is. You go over to your water meter and you'll typically have the pipe that's either coming out of the floor or it'll come out of the wall and turn up. And you look at this section that comes out of the floor or comes out of the wall. You look at that section. This picture is a close-up of right in this area, so where the valve is. So this section is the part that's coming up out of the floor. This is what you call, this is the lead service, and then this is the lead ball. So this is the connection between lead and copper that allows it to tie into that valve. So you want to come over to this section of your service that's before your valve and take a look. See if you see this dullish gray material. If you take a key or you take something to scratch the outside of it just a little bit, you don't want to jostle the service or move it, but you just lightly scratch it even with your fingernail and it's a shiny gray, that means that you have a lead service. Or at least this section of your service is lead. So that's one way to tell if you do have a lead service within your house. This is another picture kind of just showing as it comes up. Again, the lead ball is right there, so the lead service comes up through the floor, the lead ball, the valve, and then it changes to iron pipe, and then on this side is iron pipe turning into copper over there. So again, you need to locate where your meter is, find out where it is. So if you have pipe that looks like this, again, a dullish gray material, these are both lead services that were removed. We're required by our ACO to keep samples of all the lead services that have been removed within our system. So we have them for the thousands that have been removed per our ACO. But if you take this, you take just your fingernail and you scratch it. I don't know if it can be seen on the camera, but you have that bright lead. This is malleable. If I really wanted to put this over my knee and bend it, I could. But that's not something that you want to do. You don't want to try to bend that service or move that service, because that could break that protective coating on the inside that we talked about. You want to just take your fingernail, lightly scratch it, and see if it's shiny underneath. That will tell you if it's lead. If it's if it's a copper color like a penny or a greenish, tarnished color, you're talking most likely you probably have a copper service. If it's a black plastic or a blue plastic, or different types of colored plastics that we use, then you have a plastic service. You most likely don't have a lead service. So that's kind of the first spot that you would start to see whether you had lead service. Again, while you're down there in your basement, if you want to check your plumbing, you check your copper pipes, and you look if you have copper pipes, and your house was built prior to 2000, you probably have lead solder within those. And again, we talked about brass plumbing fixtures and other types of plumbing fixtures. It was all lead up until 2014 when that regulation was put into effect. So, talk a little bit about the lead service line replacement. So EPA enacted the lead and copper rule back in the day to protect the public health, reduce the exposure to lead and copper within the drinking system. HUD encourages and supports lead service replacement. The water that's pumped now, again, like we talked about, is what they call more passive. So it's less corrosive, it doesn't eat away, it's allowed, lead services are allowed to build that protective coating on the inside as well as copper, and it won't dissolve the lead in the copper as much as if we were at different pHs. And again, we've had a multi-year program, we've been going for years here, of lead service removal. So something that we've been proactively doing as per our ACO, as per the lead and copper removal requirements. You know, something that's coming up is the revised lead and copper rule. So a lot of stuff that we're gonna have to be doing over the next 6 months, year, is something that was gonna be required through the new lead and copper rule. The lead and copper rule was something that was enacted, it was about 2 years ago. Under President Trump's administration through the EPA. Then when President Biden came on, they put a hold on the lead and copper rule. The industry suspects to make it more stringent than what was previously, than what was put out by the previous administration. But there's going to be a lot more requirements for all communities to be able to do lead service removal. Under the new lead and copper rule, they're only going to count a lead service as removed if it's a full lead service that's removed. They're going to require full interactive maps of the communities and to show all the locations of lead services. And there's a lot of other requirements within that lead and copper rule. Again, they pulled it back. They never fully released it. They're revising it. It was supposed to be out by the end of December. I've heard rumblings that it's going to be pushed out for a further period of time, that they won't be releasing it at this time. But some of the things that we're going to be doing moving forward is going to be coming up anyways. And these are, you know, I think we've all talked about them, is the unfunded mandates. You know, they come down with these mandates that we have to invest and change things, and they don't come with, the federal government, it doesn't come with money to back these particular mandates up. You know, I know right now there's a lot of federal money out there, and I think the board knows that I love chasing as much money as I can, so we don't have to put the burden onto the ratepayers, but sometimes there's not enough, and ratepayers do have to burden some of these costs. Lead service line credit program. So right now, overall within our system, we look back at our records, and we estimate there was about 5,000 lead services throughout our whole entire system back that were installed. When we originally started looking at the lead service replacement back in the 90s, the late 90s, we estimate there was about 5,000 lead services. We're working to verify and update those records. So one thing, you know, I know we're going to get a lot of calls from people moving forward, because this is already on the radio. It's going to be on the news tonight. There's going to be mailings going out. So there's going to be a lot of publicity about this, and there's going to be a lot of questions. One thing that I've asked my staff with all the calls that we get, that I ask the people out there, if you're going to call us, you know, and you're going to ask the questions and stuff like that, we'll walk through you with how to determine if you have a lead service or not. But if you determine that you do, just give us a call back, let us know. So that way we can verify our records. We can make sure we can have a real verification that you do have a service, or that you don't have a service within your property. That would be something that would be helpful from everybody. So far, over 3,000 lead services have been replaced from the main to the curb stop. That's something that we've been working on for years now. So we have a credit program for the homeowners if they replace their lead service. This program has been in place since we started the lead service removal program back in the late 90s. And it started out with $100 for the section from the main to the curb stop, and then there would be another $100 if they did from the curb stop into the house. Probably about 5-6 years ago, it was updated to $500 per section. So if the property owner replaced from the main to the curb stop, they would get a $500 credit applied to their bill. If they replace the section from the curb stop into the house, they would get another $500 credit on their bill. There's a form that needs to be filled out. We need to get a section of the lead service, copy of the bill done by the drain layer, and our inspection needs to be done on the removal of the lead service. So those are just requirements to be able to receive that credit, but it's all stuff that we worked with our customers. So when we've done our lead service removal and we've replaced from the main to the curb stop, we've always let the customers that have lead service know about this program. Some customers take advantage of it, but not all customers. Very few customers have taken advantage of being able to replace their lead service. If we're doing from the main to the curb stop, for them to do from the curb stop into the house, they could get a $500 credit. They could potentially have the contractor that's doing our work. We've never told that a customer can't use a contractor that's doing our contract, or they could use their own private contractor as long as they're a licensed drain layer to do the work. But to be able to get the savings of economy of somebody being out there, the road being, the area being torn up at that time to replace that lead service and be able to get a credit, I wish it was something that more of our customers would take advantage of. So this is just a piece of copper that, guys, this is again just a file photo that we had. But so to replace a service, this is the type of trench that you would see. You can see back in the edge of the sidewalk here is a blue mark. So probably right in this grass area or in the sidewalk is where the curb stop is. So this crew is most likely replacing the service from the main to the curb stop area. So they'd have to excavate again over here. And potentially what we like to do and most contractors like to do is we try to pass a cable through the lead service and pull it so you don't have to dig the whole entire way. It's a cost savings with and not having to tear up the road. That doesn't always work, and then sometimes they have to fully excavate from here to the side of the road. Then there's also the section of service that goes from this curb stop all the way up into the house, into the property, and that section will need to be replaced as well. So just let's talk a little bit about the notification process that we're going to have to do. So far, we've been in contact with DEP and EPA. I've had multiple meetings with the two organizations together. I've had multiple conversations with DEP, South Coast region here. They've been relaying all the information up to Boston about what's going on. Again, this is an action level exceedance. This is not a violation. What it means is that we need to take action. The action that we need to take is public notification, as well as other steps that'll be coming out in future months. But our first step is by November 30th, we need to get public notification out there. That's what we've been working with them to get out there, and that's what we're going to be doing moving forward. So first, we need to get hard copies of the following to a pamphlet that we've developed. It's been approved by DEP. We need to get it out. So we've given some to the Board of Health. We're giving some copies to the school department so they can distribute to the schools and make them available if people need them. All that, and also we're working with Fall River Housing Authority, giving them copies so they can get them to all their properties. So if people at their properties would like them, they would be able to have them. That'll all be done prior to November 30th. We worked with the health department to get a list of all of the child care facilities within the city, healthcare facilities, doctors' offices, health organizations. We work to be able to get all their information. We're going to be mailing all of them the pamphlet as well. Medical facilities, OBGYNs, WIC office, Department of Transition Assistance. That'll all be by November 30th. It'll be mailed to all customers billing address. So all 20,000 customers that we have, we need to mail the informational pamphlet out to. So those informational pamphlets have been printed over the past week. They've been reviewed by DEP, approved for us to be able to be sent out. They've been printed over the past week. They'll all be delivered to the post office by close of business tomorrow. I expect over the weekend, most customers will receive them then, and then, so then we'll meet that requirement. We're gonna hand deliver to some of the public housing complexes. Again, that's working with Fall River Housing Authority to get those distributed. We're gonna be printing a notice on future water bills, talking about the exceedance. Our CCR report will need to have, I think we have another notification, yep. So, press release, that was released this afternoon, so at 3 o'clock this afternoon, I was on WSAR and talked about this action level exceedance, talked about what people can expect, and talked about what we're gonna be doing moving forward. We did a PSA, public service announcement that was released to Channel 6, Channel 10, Channel 12, WSAR Portuguese, as well as O Journal, and the Herald News. So those are all the required public media outreaches that we're going to be doing. So we do have copies of the information in different languages. DEP's EJC community map required us to do it in Portuguese, Spanish, as well as Khmer. So those are available. We do have them in our office. The public notification pamphlet that's being out has a blurb on the front and asking people in those languages either have this pamphlet translated for you or contact us so that we can mail you one in the proper language that you're looking for. So, Water Board meeting, Board of Health has asked me to be at their Board of Health, which I'll probably be doing this presentation to them as well, and I expect we'll be having other public discussions about this in the future. So, the other things that we're going to be doing moving forward, again, we're still working with DEP and EPA on some requirements that they're going to have. We're going to be required to do quarterly testing now for lead moving forward until we get 2 clear samples and are able to reduce that sampling frequency. You know, other things, like some of the biggest things to remember. If you do have a lead service or you're concerned, flush your tap water, use cold water, flush it for 15 to 30 seconds before you use it. We do offer a credit program for removal of your lead service for customers to be able to do that if they do have a lead service. One thing, if you do have a lead service and you're concerned and you want to have some sampling, you want to test your own water, we do have a list of DEP certified labs that can sample for customers. We've contacted them. That's available on the city website, or you can call the office and we can mail you the list of those laboratories. The other thing, if you're still concerned, you could get a water filter. Not all water filters will filter out lead. You have to make sure that the particular water filter that you're purchasing will filter out lead. You know, Brita, there's different styles of Brita filters. Some do lead, some don't. That's just a brand name. There are other ones out there that do and don't, so just be careful. We also will have a pamphlet on the city website that it talks about the water filters as well and what to look for when you're purchasing one. So, I know that was a long presentation, and thank you very much for hanging in there. But you know, this is something that's going to be that's going to be out there. There's going to be a lot of discussion on it moving forward, and you know, I think one thing is getting the proper information out there is going to be one of our biggest things, because there's going to be so much misinformation of where this could go or what's happening. But one thing we got to remember: this isn't new to the city of Fall River. This isn't, you know, we didn't change our water chemistry and all of a sudden our lead numbers are out of the roof. So,
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Excellent presentation. That completes item number 6. Item number 7 is updates on ongoing projects. Tice Sales supply of AMI. Equipment change order is for $0.
Yeah, so this was
Best kind.
this was a time extension just to be able to continue the project still underway and moving forward, and there was no monetary change.
Do the notification on the meter changeout, they were running very low during the COVID period. That seems to have picked up since COVID is.
Yeah, so COVID put almost pumped the brakes on the whole
Yeah.
project. You know, there was a lot of what was going on, so we kind of put a hold on the whole project. Once we got going again, we got back into replacing AMRs, and then we started more with the mailers and entering people's properties to replace the meters. The numbers are still kind of low, so if anybody has received a card from Felch Engineering saying that the city wants to replace their water meter, please contact the phone numbers on there, schedule an appointment. They have Saturdays, they have nights to try to work around people's schedules. But you know, this is something that we need to get done because it still is a very low compliance rate on that project.
Do we need to consider any other steps such as enforcement?
There is things that we're looking at right now. I think we're on a third round of sending out mailers to customers to try to get, looking from there. Some of the next things that we may be looking at is, potentially unestimated accounts or something, potentially escalating bills.
I
Because
threatened shut off at one point.
that's where do we go with that? But I think we need to get through this next round and see what type of compliance we get to. We're gonna try door hangers. We're talking about trying knocking on doors and stuff like that. So we're developing the plans right now. We want to see what the compliance rate is out of this mailing, and then we'll see moving forward.
I'd be interested to follow that because, again, we did the meter change-out program in 96, 7, and 8, and we beat the bushes, and it was the threat of termination of service because the meter was considered a condition of receiving service. So
Correct. Yep.
that takes care of that.
Motion to approve the change order?
I'm sorry.
Motion to approve the change order.
Yeah, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Item number 8, other potential matters. Wilson Road Water Booster Pump Station.
So I just wanted to bring this to the board's attention. We did receive a grant from the Mass Works. It was just approved by the city council, and we will be moving forward. So on Wilson Road, we're doing we're going to be sharing a station with a wastewater pump station. A wastewater pump station, all the pumps and pipes and everything will be underground. Our drinking water station will be above ground. The other portion of the building that will be sewer will only be their controls and a generator and stuff. But we did receive a grant from the Mass Works in the amount of $2.5 million to be able to move forward with this project. The overall project cost is just under $7 million. A portion of it paid from the sewer department, a portion of it paid from the water department for the consecutive parts. So this grant will be shared between water and sewer. The funding is in place in the sewer department as well as the water department for the construction of the station.
Second item is Water System Improvement Project.
So this is in relation to ARPA funding. So ARPA funding was provided to the water department. We're going to be replacing some water mains with the ARPA funding. We have almost 1,700 linear feet of water mains that'll be replaced. A list has been provided within your packet. So these are streets that were some were on phase 20, some are on phase 21. Some are streets that need to be done, that the gas company is gonna be impacting as well. We try to align all these streets with those streets, to be able to move forward. So it'll be Oak Grove Ave, Mullen Street, President Ave, Cross Street, North Belmont, Vestall, Reading Street, Sterling, Welcome Street, Archer Street, Atlantic Boulevard, Moody Street, Assonet Street, Ryan Street, Duke Street, and Pembroke Street. So this will be for water main replacement as well as 31 lead services will be replaced. Additional 35 lead services will be replaced. The overall project is not going to cost the ratepayers anything. On these streets we'll be going through, we'll be replacing our water. Some streets the gas company's already replaced, or they will be replacing their main. Once all the work's done on these streets, we'll be coming back, repaving the affected streets as well as doing the sidewalks on those streets. So again, this isn't gonna cost our ratepayers, our staff will be managing the project. There isn't funding in here for staff or management, but we are getting almost 1,700 feet of main replaced and 35 lead services replaced with no cost to our ratepayers.
It's point of interest is that we're looking at just over 3 miles of new water main being put in, and yet only 36 lead services, and most of this is in an older area of the city, so it indicates exactly what you were saying before, that we've been replacing lead services at quite a rate.
Without a doubt.
Next is the water treatment plant staffing update.
So this is something that I wanted to talk to the board. I think I've spoken with both board members individually about the staffing. And just previous to this meeting, we were in front of, myself and the president were in front of city council discussing this matter as well. Staffing down at our water treatment plant is low and has been low for some time now. We are low on operators, so currently we have 2 operators to fill 4 shifts. We do have 5 budgeted operator positions. We have management that has been assisting with filling in those open shifts. As the board knows, we're a 24/7 operation operating around there. We can't shut our plant off. So, our staff has been between our lab tech who's been covering shifts, our water quality manager, our previous manager of the director of treatment and resources, which I'll get to in a second. Everybody has been putting in more than their time to assist with continuous operation of the water treatment plant. Recently, we did just lose our director of treatment, Jody Raposa. She moved on elsewhere, and that was another big loss. She was taking shifts, off shifts, Saturday shifts, night shifts that some of our operators weren't working. As the committee knows, the board knows that we've been battling to get our rates approved, which will help with, once those are approved, then we'll be able to move forward with some of our possibly adjustments that need to be made to salaries or other things down for those employees to try to draw in new employees. I'm a big proponent of trying to reach out to get staffing, to get trainees, to get people in. My hope is that there are programs out there. BCC has a training program for licensed operators. We're willing to work with people that want to get licensed and want to move into the field. This whole entire field between water and wastewater is an industry that isn't hugely appealing to people to go into, even though somebody coming out of high school, prior to COVID, I was talking with Durfee and Diamond students, and I was bringing them on tours of the plants to try to get them interested into the field. Somebody coming out of a vocational high school, and acquiring a drinking water license or a wastewater operator's license could be immediately employable, without a doubt. There's no doubt in my mind.
No doubt in
If
mine.
they want to work, they can work. You know, we're not the only system in this situation, I can tell you that much. This is a statewide, region-wide issue, almost nationwide issue. But it's something that we need to work on. Our employees need to have comparable rates to other systems. We're a lot lower right now than other systems. I can tell you that right off the bat. I've recently done a comparison of operators to other systems. You know, our management in Fall River highly underpaid compared to other systems. You know, I was just having a discussion with somebody about directors and you know, what people paid, and somebody says, well, you know, this director is getting paid almost the same amount as this director from the other community, but the director that does for Fall River isn't just doing the drinking water system, he's doing the drinking water system and the wastewater system. He's the primary for both. So, you know, there's a lot of things that play in. So when it comes to that point, you know, and I've heard this a lot from the council recently too, about, you know, that our employees are underpaid, but there needs to be a correction to that. We can't just sit there and say that our employees are underpaid with no action to it. So just something that I wanted to talk about. So currently we do have, with the staffing issue that we've had with the operators, and then with our director leaving, and she did give us proper notice, but it was you know, with a 2-week notice, which is, you know, recommended, but it's a short time we wouldn't have enough time to advertise, get somebody on board and cross-train. At that point, I made the decision to reach out to a couple of our consultants that do operations and management of plants. Woodward and Curran was able to provide us a management personnel to be able to come in to work to manage our plant. You know, somebody needs to be there. There's daily, weekly, monthly DEP reports that need to be completed. There's monthly reports for NIPTs down at that plant that need to be completed and submitted. Air quality monitoring reports, chemical reports, contaminant reports, as well as daily management of the staff, as well as oversight of the whole entire operation of the treatment plant. That is not something that we could afford to try to wing it. That isn't something that we could really afford to. So I made the decision to bring in somebody while we search to bring in a qualified person to fill that position.
I think we're gonna have to look at all sorts of alternatives here.
You know, it is something that we're going to have to look at. You know, again with you know, again, the rates that we pay, it's going to be tough to pull in a qualified, certified person to be able to manage that facility. It's something we're going to have to look at, and we may not be able to find them, and then we'll have to look at alternatives.
Jody was pulling a shift, and yet she's salaried employee, so she wasn't even being compensated for the work that she was doing. We lost her for less than $10,000.
Correct.
It's a terrible situation. And we just left the city council, in which we had to scramble for support for a water rate, just to get it to the full body. It's not a good situation.
No. No, again, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring up this staffing issue. That way, the board's aware, everybody's aware of the situation that's ongoing. You know, it's not a good one. My hope is through some talks that are ongoing and other things, we'll be able to better some of this. My hopes is that we do get rates that support our budget moving forward. You know, and that's one thing that I've said in front of council multiple times, and you reiterated tonight, is coming down and having to have these uncomfortable they're uncomfortable discussions, but they're discussions about it. Nobody wants to see a rate increase, nobody wants to see that, but we need to be able to support our department, you know. But all of that going back to our employees as well, you know, how does that make an employee feel stable that they're gonna have a job next
It
year?
erodes the morale.
Right.
You don't know whether or not you have a viable employment,
Right.
especially for somebody who has a ticket, who can move that from place to place to place into a more stable environment. No, it's untenable.
Yep, more stable, better paying environment compared to,
It is so frustrating to hear the political reasons why they don't want to take the bull by the horns. Those simple facts of life are, without water, you're not going to have a city, period. You don't have a life. This isn't, and we're talking pennies. We're talking pennies. It's tough. Nice work bringing them in, though.
yeah, you know, again, it wasn't something, it isn't something that I have the time, you know, my days now are beyond booked, you know, and there was no other staff that we would be able to.
There's
do,
nothing you
so
could do.
It was something that needed to be done to make sure we stay compliant with all of our regulations, make sure we are working with regulation agencies to be able to keep our system safe and keep the water going out to our customers.
I don't know. I think going forward, perhaps more communication, open communication with the council might help. This might help. But we need all the help we can get at this point. I mean, we've got to look at every option, period.
Yep.
That concludes the agenda. Any other business to come before the board?
No.
Hearing none. Motion to adjourn, seconded. Motion made, seconded. All in favor, aye, at 8:10 PM.
Thank you very much.